Good evening. This is a special meeting of the Board of Appeals. Called tonight. We have members tonight present: Brian Gladstein, Greta Haney, Robin Kramer, myself. We have 4 members on, although it's a 5-member board. That's what we have. We have 4 members that are on. We also have our counsel, Charlie Gottlieb. We have Ashley Lay, the planning office of AKRF, and John Keller from the engineering firm. The purpose of tonight's meeting is really with regard to one matter only. We're going to also do some other things, but I gather we're not now because of the change in the agenda. So it's going to go 416 Waverly Avenue. The real purpose of this was just to allow the applicant on 416 Waverly to provide, they wanted an opportunity to comment, provide any other information, respond to any inquiries, so that we could then address the matter, because and we will do so after the meeting, I guess between now and the next meeting or two. It'll have to be addressed, and we will take that up with council as well. But the real purpose here is that in order to finalize the FEIS and to allow the applicant to address the board, go over the present status, and after that, we will deliberate with regard to the completion of the FEIS and the finding statements as may be appropriate. Okay. Charlie, are you here? Can't see you there. Yeah.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Is that correct, Charlie, from your standpoint, from the legal standpoint?
Yes, that sounds correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, is the applicant here?
They are, so let me promote
And
them.
one thing on the board feels my inclination is to let them make a presentation for half an hour, and then we have questions, we can deal with those, or inadequate responses to prior things.
Right.
This is really not argumentative, but just try to get everything on the table here. Hi, Robin, how are you? See you then.
There's quite a few from the applicant's team here. Do you want them all promoted to panelists?
Well, let's see. I gather just trying to take a quick look here. I guess Mr. Joffrey is he here?
Yes.
I guess promote him, and if he wants to promote everybody else, whoever he wants to promote, sure. How many people do they have?
So I brought up their attorney, planner, engineer, and traffic engineer.
Fine. And then Ashley, you'll also have some opportunities. You can address this as well in terms of this as appropriate.
Okay, I think their team is promoted and ready to speak whenever
Okay,
we would like to invite them to do so.
sure. All right. Mr. Joffrey here?
Good evening, Chairman Neufeld, members of the board. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, East Coast North Properties, LLC. Actually, I don't know if you can see if Sean or Chris Murphy are also attending. They would also like to make a brief comment at the beginning.
Okay, well, let me just address something with you first. I don't know if you followed me or if you were listening or not, I'm not sure. But basically, the point here is just that you had wanted an opportunity to address the board on this, and we've been through a lot and heard a lot on this. So if you want to do so, obviously you can do so briefly. And then I think it's the board or its consultants may have some questions about inquiries that we made, so we can get to that. So we can at least wrap up this part of it today. So then the board can then make its determinations regarding finalization of the FEIS and the finding statement. But if you'd like to begin that way, fine. If not, we have some questions that different members have and that exist out there, open questions. But if you want to go first that way, why don't you just do that?
And we would appreciate that. And Mr. Chairman, we'd like to thank you and the board for the opportunity to be able to present to you and be elevated as panelists this evening. We had the opportunity to watch your April meeting from last month, and we thought it was a very productive discussion. And having, the opportunity, although we weren't panelists at that meeting, the board having the opportunity to delve deep on one of the issues, I think was very, very helpful in addressing one of the issues. And I think the issue as it relates to the contamination got its due course in that meeting. Some of the questions that the board had seemed to be resolved. So we'd like to take the opportunity this evening just to go through a couple of brief opening statements. We have our professionals on the Zoom this evening. So, and we know that the board has in particular two questions in particular as it relates to flooding and stormwater impacts, as well as visuals. So we'd like to devote some time and attention to that. But to begin with, I'd like to, I think Chris Murphy, one of the principals for the project I see has been promoted to panelist and would like to make a statement. And then I'll orient the board to the order of the presentation that we'd like to go to. Our intent this evening is to address your comments and concerns and questions. I do recall at the end of your April meeting that the board asked Ms. Lai to go back and review the November meeting. We took great care to watch that meeting, take notes to try to respond in the FEIS to the open comments and questions. We didn't see any memoranda, so I don't know if Ms. Lai had the opportunity to finish that, or if we did respond to all those comments. But our goal here is to present an FEIS to you that addresses all of your comments and questions. So whether we need to respond further in writing, whether you have open comments and questions as of this evening, we'd like to try to endeavor to answer them tonight, but if we can't, we'd certainly like the opportunity to present to you a full and complete document for your review.
Let me ask you this, what are you planning on presenting and what's your time period on this? So we get a sense here if we're all on the same page, we can do this.
We did not do a dress rehearsal, so I don't know the length of time, but Mr. Murphy would just like to make a couple of brief comments. Mr. Cleary will then speak with respect to where we are in this FEIS DIS process and our attempt at being as responsive as we can to the comments and questions that have come up from the board. Next, Michael Stein will then speak.
No, fuck it.
Mike Murphy, can you please mute yourself? Then Michael Stein will talk about flooding and stormwater. Kim Martelli will walk you through some of the visuals and address the visual comments and questions that you had. We do have Brian Dempsey, our traffic engineer, who can very briefly, I don't think that was a significant question or concern that the board had, but Mr. Dempsey's here to address some of the changes because as you're aware, we did take great pains to redesign and re-envision the project from the DEIS to where it stands right now, and in trying to address the comments and concerns that we heard from the board. And we're also addressing the Maker Zone initiative, as well as some of the comments that we've heard throughout this entire process in response to the DEIS. And then Bill Canavan is also here this evening. I think, again, the contamination questions have been resolved and addressed at the last meeting, but he's here to the extent that you have any open questions for him. So that's the outline of what we'd like to go through, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay with you.
Okay, why don't you go ahead? We have some time constraints, but go ahead.
Okay. So I will turn it over to Chris Murphy, one of the principals for the applicant.
I'm going to let, we prepared a statement. I'm going to let Michael Murphy read it for me. If that's all right, Tony?
Yep.
Sean couldn't make it.
Michael? Okay, seems Mr. Murphy's having some technical difficulties. So if okay with the board, why don't we?
Hang on, Mike, it's coming on now. It's on. You can speak. Say hello. Hi,
Hello, good evening.
Can you hear me, Chairman Neufeld?
Yes, I can.
Great. Sorry,
You
technical
can hear me, I can hear
No,
you.
it
We're
is.
all doing fine.
We love technology, but we don't trust it.
All right.
Anyways, good evening, Chairman Newfeld and the Village Zoning Board members. My name is Michael Murphy, and I will be speaking on behalf of Chris and Sean Murphy. Sean and Chris Murphy are the owners of Murphy Brothers Contracting and Mamaroneck Self-Storage, and are the applicants for the property being referred to as 416 Waverly Avenue, East Coast North Properties. For the record, this is the property located at the corner of Waverly Avenue and Fenimore Road that they have jointly owned for 22 years. Just a little background, as you may know, Chris and Sean first came to before the Mamaroneck Land Use Boards in 2008, asking for approval of a 90,000 square foot self-storage facility. In 2009, the proposed project received a positive declaration from the ZBA. Concurrently, the state of the economy in 2009 severely affected their construction businesses' ability to make money. At this time, they were unfamiliar with the self-storage business and if it would be successful. They were also very concerned about the added cost of going through the secret process, and also so they withdrew the application. The economy improved in 2010 and the construction business picked up. They decided again in 2012 to seek approval to build a self-storage facility on their property, however, only asking for a 40,000 square foot building. When they appeared before the ZBA in 2014 for what is now Mamaroneck Self-Storage, their attorney indicated to the board that it would be the first self-storage building of its kind in the community, and if it succeeded, the applicant would come back and ask for more. So Mamaroneck Self-Storage opened the doors to the Mamaroneck community in October of 2015. And it's been a very successful venture. It certainly has proved to be the community's local self-storage solution, judging by the fact that over 2/3 of our clients come from 2 zip codes, 10543 and 10538. That's Larchmont and Mamaroneck. We're happy to be providing a service to the community at 90 to 100% capacity year-round. Currently, Mamaroneck Self-Storage is the only building in the industrial area that manages its own stormwater. The building does not add to traffic or parking problems in the industrial area, nor do we burden the village fire department or the DPW, and we don't add additional kids to the village school systems. As you'll see from the renderings of our proposed project, the design reflects the spirit of the Maker Zone's intent. We see our building as a gateway to the village, welcoming traffic from Larchmont, Mamaroneck, and I-95 North exit ramp. We also see it as an anchor, a starting point for an improved development in the industrial area, an area that generates significant tax revenue to the village, and an area that desperately needs improvement. It is possible that other industrial area property owners who would like to make improvements or upgrades will be reluctant to come before the village land use boards because they too may have to spend several years and millions of dollars just to improve their properties. Tonight is the 33rd meeting that this application overall has attended. 33 meetings. Since starting at the Mamaroneck Planning Board in May 23rd, 2018, we have been to 1 planning board meeting, 2 Harbor Coastal Zoning Commission meetings, and 29 Zoning Board of Appeal meetings. Tonight marks the application's 30th time before the ZBA. That means that in 29 meetings, we have not been allowed to make a full presentation of the proposed project. This process has been time-consuming and expensive, upwards to $1 million in expenses and lost revenue. Over the years, we have listened to your comments and concerns, and we have heard you. We have redesigned the proposed addition with significant changes to the square footage and overall design. Members of our team have been cut off and kept from speaking at public meetings. And since the format of these meetings changed to Zoom instead of in person, some representatives for this application have not been promoted and were kept from speaking or responding at certain meetings. It has been 4 years and no member of any land use boards has officially visited the site to see what is existing and what we are proposing. I'm going to repeat that statement, Chairman. It has been 4 years and no member of any of the land use boards has officially visited the site to see what is existing and what we are proposing. We invite any and all for you to do so. What we are requesting tonight is that the members of the board allow all the members of our team to present their portions to this project. Please, after all these years, Mr. Chairman, give them your attention.
I just have one question. This is the was it the 30th time you've been on the agenda of the zoning board for this application?
Yes. Yes.
I think you should know that.
In case you don't,
No, I don't know that. I don't. You've just said.
You're on almost all 30 of them.
So, Mr. Chairman, we certainly appreciate your attention to this matter. We thank you again for the opportunity to be heard this evening. I'm now going to ask Mr. Cleary just to summarize where we are in the FEIS, DEIS process for you and indicate again how we've been trying to be responsive to your comments and questions on this very important project for the village.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Appreciate the opportunity. I'll be brief. We are in the process of trying to move the FEI, the environmental impact statement along, subject to your positive declaration in what was.
Excuse me, I'm not showing you on here. That's why I'm interrupting you. Oh, there we go. Okay, fine.
Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Now I can, yeah.
Okay, good. Your positive declaration that was adopted back in 2019 resulted in the preparation of this team's draft environmental impact statement. You had a public hearing on that in April of 21. The result of that public hearing was a series of technical comments, was a number of issues that simply required clarification in the FEIS. And there was also, we believed, some general opposition to the project. So what the team has done, as Tony indicated and as Mike indicated, we have absolutely completely re-envisioned the project that was presented in the DEIS. And I hope you've had an opportunity to take a look at that in the FEIS. It's reduced in scale and it's been reduced in scope. Mike's invitation to the site, I think, is critical for you to understand. The plan in the DEIS proposed removing 3 of the 4 existing industrial buildings on the site and replacing it with a 56,000 square foot self-storage building. The current plan, the FEIS plan, has reduced that building to 43,000 square feet. All 4 of those older industrial buildings would be removed. Those industrial buildings, by the way, total something in the amount of 18,500 square feet. So the net increase on this site is about 25,000 square feet. It's important to bear that in mind. The building, importantly, as you'll hear tonight, and again, we want to spend some time really delving into some of these issues. It was sort of monolithic in a sense when you saw it earlier. That has been completely revised. The architecture of the building now reflects sort of 5 different segments, distinctively articulated, clad in different facade materials. It kind of looks like 5 different buildings sitting next to one another. The height's been reduced. So there was considerable issues about height. The building now intersects the 4-story building, drops to 3 stories as it moves to the north, drops to 2 stories, and yet drops again further to a terrace out to Fenimore Road, which really significantly reduces the perception of mass of this building. So we have a building with reduced square footage, reduced footprint, reduced FAR, and reduced height. All of that done in response to the comment and criticism that was coming from your board. So I think at the end of the day, it's a better project, and it's a better project because your board has been pushing us to make it a better project in certain ways. There's a park now proposed on the corner of Waverly and Fenimore, a publicly accessible vest pocket park, which wasn't proposed before. So and the FEIS again has really addressed in great detail the flooding issue, the hazardous materials, visual impacts, lighting, traffic, transportation, economics, and construction related issues, and importantly, the technical legal issue of segmentation that has been raised previously. The FEIS has been submitted to your board twice, revised twice. We believe we have addressed every issue that's raised thoroughly and comprehensively. And what we'd like to do tonight is really walk through some of those major issues of concern that you've expressed previously. So I'm going to hand off to Michael Stein, who's going to talk about the flooding and stormwater issues.
Thank you, Mr. Cleary.
Good evening, Michael Stein, President of Hudson Engineering. We're the engineers of record for the project. I also have with me this evening Thomas Cohaney from my office. I believe he's got his hand up. Ashley, if you could promote him as well. He may be able to add some additional information if as questions may arise. So what we're looking at, and I just shared my screen, is this is the proposed stormwater management plan we have developed for this proposed building and parking lot. The original self-storage that was constructed previously is located on this portion. There was a portion of the existing parking lot that also served that building. During that time, we had put in water quality measures serving that aspect of the development, which included both green infrastructure as well as other water quality components. That project had resulted in a decrease in impervious area as well. Therefore, we weren't required to do stormwater management. As far as attenuating flows on site. We, at the same time, we would not want to attenuate those flows on site because that would allow the water leaving the site to coincide with waters all the way up at the headwaters of the river that's tributary to. It included a rain garden directly on Waverly Avenue that the roof leaders were directed into. The parking lot was directed into a collection system on that portion of the lot, which then connected to the catch basin located on the corner of Waverly and Fenimore. As part of this development, we followed along that same path. Overall, there was approximately 1,270 square foot decrease in impervious area with the proposed development. That included the park that's located at the corner with lawn and landscaping, as well as some buffering plantings between the parking lot and Waverly Avenue. All the existing parking area will again be directed and to this catch basin here, which goes into a structure. It's called a hydrodynamic separator. It's basically a swirl chamber that is a DEC approved measure for providing water quality treatment to runoff coming from development. It'll eliminate floatables in the water as well as silt and sediment that the storm runoff is carrying, along with the pollutants that attach to them.
Mr. Stein, if I could just interrupt you for 1 second. Is
Sure.
this the same as the drawing 1-9?
This is
I just can't see it on the. screen.
C2.
Oh, this is C2.
Yes, C2 of our drawing set.
All right, I'm just referring to your FEIS statement, and it's 1-9, looks to be this one, but
Mr. Chairman, you're correct. It's drawing 1-9 in the FEIS.
okay, thank you.
Okay, my apologies.
No apologies necessary, just want to understand.
And so the building and portion of the parking lot down at this end of the lot, we're actually directing the stormwater runoff coming into a new rain garden going off the edge of this building that will also contribute towards reducing the impervious area, but again, providing a water quality treatment that's considered a green practice. And as you'll see from some of the street views that Ms. Martelli will be putting up later on, it can be a substantial amenity to this area as one of the first views you'll be coming into going down this road. As far as, and so then I'll get into the next, or really I know probably the primary concern is the flood volume. On the flood volume, part of what we had prepared was a volumetric analysis of the available volume that could flood onto the property. We looked at the existing conditions and we looked at the proposed conditions. So the intent is that as part of the development, we do not want to take up flood storage volume, which could potentially cause flooding elsewhere on other people's properties. So we look at each elevation, and that's what all the different colors are on that drawing, is between each elevation, we're listing what the existing flood storage volume is on site. So you can see in total up to elevation 26, we're a cumulative storage of 34,528. And each of the colors again represents the differences in elevation. So the intent is that we're not just looking at the total volumetric analysis at the end, but we're going through each elevation. So between elevation 21 and 22 in the existing, we had 118 cubic feet. However, now as we look at it in the proposed condition, we have 873. So it's not just at the final floodplain elevation, which is elevation 26 on the site. We're making sure that every foot of elevation on the property has not changed. In our case, it actually has improved for every single elevation. What that analysis also does not do is take into consideration that flood analysis does not take into consideration the footprint of the proposed building. The footprint of that proposed building, it will be floodable, where we will have flood vents provided on that building, where if the flood elevation starts to rise in this area, and it'll flood in, and as the flooding recedes, the flood waters will be allowed to flood back out. So in a comparison of the existing and proposed areas on volumes on site, we have increased overall for the total flood storage volume approximately 113 cubic feet of storage. And you're talking that flood storage volume is in proposed condition is 34,641. If we actually take into consideration the footprint of the building that we're putting in to allow it to be floodable, that is an additional 47,000 cubic feet of flood volume. That's above and beyond currently what exists. And so we're actually providing a substantial benefit in addition to outside of the building. And as far as flooding during the hurricane, Hurricane Ida, as most of you have been throughout the village, I'm sure actually all of you have been throughout the village to see the devastation that occurred. This was a historic storm. We typically designed for a 100-year storm event, and for FEMA, the 100-year storm event is approximately 9.5 inches of rainfall for the type of storm that is encountered in this area. For that storm event is, again, it's 9.5 inches of rain during a 24-hour period, but that is a bell curve. It starts off slow, it crests, and then it slows down. In Ida's event, this was a historic storm. In a 4-hour period, there was 10.5 inches of rain. Hence the reason that the flood waters went to elevations that were above the 100-year identified flood elevation. Whereas the existing building is elevation 28, the flood elevation is elevation 26 for the FEMA 100-year flood zone. In the building during the storm, is my understanding, in my discussions with the Murphy brothers, is that there was approximately 4 inches of water that had entered into the building. So as part of what their development is, exclusive of even what's going on with this new building, is they have floodgates that will be able to be put into place should any predictions of further storms ever occur, and that would prevent any further water from coming back into the buildings again.
The floodgates stop it from going into the building, or?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, in my own house, part of what happened was my house has never flooded. It flooded. Part of what I purchased for my own house was a floodgate that covers the door from my garage to my inside. The water can fill up to 4.5 feet inside my garage and will never get to the inside of my house. And once we finish the presentation, any questions the board has, we will be here. But I'll hand it back to Tony, I think, or am I turning it over to Kim? You're on mute.
Apologies. So Kim Martelli is going to be speaking next to address the visual comments that the board raised and to walk you through the visual materials that were presented in the FEIS.
Good evening, I'm Kim Martelli, owner and principal of KTM Architects. Also located up the street from you guys in the village of Mamaroneck. We're at 700 Fenimore Road, so we have a perfect view of this facility. And tonight, I'll walk you through some of the simpler documents you've seen in the past including visuals like the site plan that you're looking at right now, all through the 3D renderings, including both daytime and evening renderings from multiple vantage points. As Mike began, this is a visual of the existing site conditions. Primarily, the highlighted gray building is the existing self-storage facility. And for orientation, on the lower north corner, that is the 1.5-story stucco and 2-story storefront building at the corner of Waverly Avenue and Fenimore Road. And for a better vantage point, I'd just like to share with you a visual taken from a little bit higher view, not quite aerial, but it gives you a sense of what is there today. This is the self-storage facility as constructed. And you can see the other structures that remain at the center, the Murphy Brothers Contracting Facility, a building we typically refer to as the barn building. And then there is that front corner north building.
Is that photograph in the FEIS?
Yes, I believe it's the existing condition photo. And Mr. Neufeld, we also have photos taken from pedestrian perspectives as well. And I'll utilize some of those in referencing our 3D models.
And Kim, just to clarify, Mr. Chairman, this photo is not in the FEIS. We'd be happy to include it.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like a copy of that, so thank you.
Just as a
I think these were from a prior presentation that we made to the board, just to orient you to the changes that were being made.
So keeping this vantage point in mind, I just want the board to get an understanding of what the prior application was and the prior scale of the building. So to give you that sense, we provided a rendering that illustrates both the existing condition buildings and that prior proposed rendering. So let me bring you back for orientation. This is a view at the corner of Fenimore and Waverly. There's the corner north building. Here is the remainder of where the barn building is. And here's how the original proposed addition overlapped those existing structures. It gives you a sense of setback and scale and relationship to the existing self-storage building. As the members of my team have advised, we've since redesigned and reimagined the building to be a smaller scale, less evasive building. And we'll take you through some of those views. This is the current proposed site plan. The colors are intended to illustrate the tiered heights. At Fenimore Road, we are no longer in close proximity to the street. We have a 27-foot setback within which are those tiered rain gardens that Mr. Stein talked about. The lowest level of the building is a 2-story portion in gray. It then steps up to a small 3-story portion. This is that peachy color. And then the largest height consistent with the existing building is 4 stories, and that's that light orange color. The light gray is the existing self-storage facility. And prior renderings, as we illustrated, included views of the newly designed building. Again, we try to take advantage of that similar vantage point just about from the corner of Fenimore and Waverly. And this is a view of our front park. On the left in front of the building are our tiered rain gardens. The lowest 2-story structure, the tier of the 3rd story, and the 4th story. And as Mr. Cleary pointed out, these are designed to give you the familiarity of multiple building types and multiple building depths and facades. We've since gone back and addressed the board's request for views from different vantage points. This is a daytime view driving down Fenimore Road. And this is as you're going through the underpass of I-95. Here is 700 Fenimore Road, my building, as you approach the village. And just beyond that, this is the tip of one of the portions of the self-storage facility. And here's our opposing structures, and we're approaching the train tracks in this view. We've taken that same vantage point in the evening, and our building is located here where I'm circling. We've also looked at vantage points from Metro North Railroad tracks. Here is the backside view and the side view of the new self-storage addition, and a view looking back down Fenimore Road toward I-95. And we've also taken that same vantage point in the evening. And here's our building. We do have safety lighting around the perimeter of the building, which has been effective and ideal at the existing structure that will continue to illuminate Railroad Way. And we've illustrated that in a view from a pedestrian vantage point on Fenimore Road. And this is when these offices are very busy. And those are beautiful gardens. We have all the floor plans available, but just as a reminder of the program, I'll zip back to zoning in a second. As a reminder of the program for the building, the ground floor contains utilitarian spaces, including restrooms, an elevator, circulation. There's a woodworking shop and self-storage units on the ground floor that interconnect with the existing building. The second floor, which is tapered back, that third floor has, the third floor has jumped the gun. There's my second floor. The second floor has Murphy Brothers offices located above the end of that woodworking space with a view of Fenimore Road. And the balance of that footprint, self-storage facility interconnecting with the existing self-storage building. The third floor has a co-working office space, and the balance of that third floor is self-storage, and the fourth floor is all self-storage. It's the smallest of all the footprints. Just for reference, we had talked in the past, as back in 2018, about similarly sized and larger buildings. Of the similarly sized or larger buildings, we represent one of the smallest. And if it's helpful, this is, Pat, I believe this is also in our FEIS, but you'll correct me if I'm wrong. Some of those include 746 Mamaroneck Avenue, a much larger in size. That's a 340,000 square foot building. 910 Stewart Avenue. That's a 7-story, 106,000 square foot building. 123 Mamaroneck Ave. That's almost 128,000, 6-story building. 845 Palmer Avenue is a 2-story, 166,000 square foot building. 270 Waverly. All three buildings are tantamount to just under 83,000 and 4 stories. 151 Fenimore, 6 and 7-story structures at 93,000. 225 Stanley Avenue, weighing in at 86,000, 4 to 5 stories. And our current proposed building at 416 Waverly Avenue, 84,812 square feet at 4 stories. We have views, visual references, and aerials of each of those buildings, and anything that's not part of your current reference materials can certainly be incorporated. And those are some of those particular structures, ranging anywhere from 2 to 7 stories in height.
I have a question on one of the pictures, if you mind.
Sure.
It's in your draft FEIS. It's 3F2 and 3F3.
Pat, you let me know where to jump.
They're rendering us daytime view from elevated railroad tracks and night views.
Sure, I'll go back to those.
Okay.
So daytime view from Metro North, nighttime view from Metro North.
No, these are from
They've been
railroad
modified
tracks.
from what-
Is it photo references, Ashley?
No, it's these same images, but the versions that are in the FEIS have some apartment buildings in the background.
Ashley, it's an auto-populated thing from our 3D program. They're auto,
Okay,
it's
that's only
auto.
the-
I guess my question is, what buildings are those that are in there? I'm staring,
Mr. Neufeld,
please.
it's an auto-populated automatic background. We just got rid of those. The program we use auto-populates with data. It's not actual data. So we write those out for correct visuals. And you'll
So
know
these-
this as you approach this area from the train tracks, right? We don't have large buildings in that direction. We have large buildings in the other.
Okay, the buildings that I see there, what are those buildings in the back?
So I'm just going to say that just to be clear, and let me know if my language is clear. The 3D program that we use to create modeling auto creates a background of buildings that are not factual.
And Chris.
And so for the visual you're looking at right now, we've removed those visuals.
Hey, Kim, I think he's asking, this is the ice house that's on the street?
No,
And the one
I
in
know the
far
ice house.
background?
I'll show, would you guys
No,
like me?
I'm not asking about the ice house. I'm
Right, I
asking
know
if-
that.
Mr.
The
Neufeld,
one in
it's
the
your-
far, let me speak. The one in the far background is the old suburban karting building that's there now.
No, if you look straight down that road that you're on, the view from the tracks, there, you just had that. Yes,
Yeah,
now if you go down the road, there are buildings in the back. You see those?
which ones? These buildings?
No. Go to the street. Follow the street in the middle of the road.
Yeah,
Okay, what are those buildings there?
Left or right?
Yes, on the left and right side of that road at the end.
Or existing.
Those are
buildings
the-
on Fenimore Road.
those are the existing buildings in the proportion that they belong. They're plotted on a map that comes, in fact, we paid your planner prior to this to help develop this plan, and we put the buildings on it, and he took it, scaled it all properly, and verified it. Your past planner.
We're sure that.
Rick Cutler?
Verified that.
Okay, so but then the ones that are in the FEIS is 3, F
F2.
and 2 and 3, those are not, those buildings do not exist. Those are just part of your program, correct?
Which ones are you talking about?
You mean the
Be
dark
replaced
ones?
with the images that are on the screen now.
No, they're not on there. That's,
They're
that's,
not
No,
on the screen now.
the versions that are in the FEIS just need to be replaced with the versions that are
Yeah.
on the screen now.
Actually, I can do that for you guys.
thank you.
Let me see, I think I got you guys to the end of just double checking. And what I was last pointing out was just any of these larger buildings that needed additional data, although I believe all of this is part of the FEIS as well. Pat can confirm that. This was information that we had pulled together in 2018. And the tail end of this is our existing buildings on the current site.
Which are proposed to be removed.
Correct, correct. All these structures are intended to be removed, and the site would be occupied by one single structure. And the balance of the site would be occupied by new, back to the beginning. This and new stormwater rain gardens and the on-site parking. Bring it back to that first visual. And I'll turn it back over, Mr. Jolly. If there are any other questions, I can answer those at the end as well for any of the board members.
So, Mr. Chairman, we have Brian Dempsey, our traffic engineer from DTS Provident here. I know the board did not really have any significant questions or comments in the last couple of meetings with respect to traffic, but Mr. Dempsey can give you a brief statement or overview of the lack of traffic impacts as it relates to the revised and redesigned and revised design, if you'd like.
Up to you. Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Tony. Just briefly summarizing traffic, we improved the site circulation as was shown on what Kim just illustrated. We're removing a driveway on Waverly Avenue. We're removing a curb cut on Fenimore Road. So there'll only be one curb cut on each street. So that'll improve safety. That was a request from our side as well as from AKRF when we did that. In terms of traffic generation, we're going to have about only half the traffic that the previous site was generating in the morning. In the afternoon, it would be approximately the same traffic. We do have no impacts on levels of service. We illustrate in the FEIS that we'll have 26 parking spaces, which will be more than sufficient throughout the day and during both day and weekends. And we're also providing 3 loading zones. Currently, there are 0 loading zones at the site. And that's a quick summary of traffic there.
So, Mr. Chairman, I don't see Bill Canavan from Hydro Environmental Solutions. I don't know if he's here, Ms. Lai, or if the board had any questions or for Mr. Canavan. It seemed, again, as I indicated earlier, that the majority of your questions as it relates to the contamination have been addressed. But that's the presentation that we had for you this evening. Oh, I do see Mr. Canavan coming on the screen right now. So we're here. We want to thank you for elevating us to panelists this evening, being able to address some of the comments and questions that we heard over the course of the last few meetings. There are a couple of housekeeping items that we noted that we will need to revise in the FAIS, but we'll be happy to try to answer any questions that the board may have.
Hey, Tony, I've been here, I'm here.
Okay, so Bill Canavan is on the screen from Hydro Environmental Solutions.
Stop video.
So, Mr. Neufeld, we'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, oh, does he not want to speak?
Bill, is there anything that you want to say from your standpoint?
I assume that's a no then, right?
Mr. Canavan will be here to answer any questions that the board may have.
Okay.
Hey, Tony,
Yes, Bill.
I've been here, I'm sorry, I was,
Okay. Bill, we're going to turn, is there anything that you would like to present to the board or give an overview about?
sure, I can give a quick overview. We did multiple subsurface investigations there. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 borings and 6 or 8 temporary wells. We sampled soil, groundwater, multiple parameters, metals, volatile organics, semi-volatile organics, pesticides, and so on. Couple reports went back and forth. AKRF reviewed a bunch of stuff. We went and addressed, I believe we addressed most of the questions they had. And at the end of the day, we're now, if this development is going to occur, it's going to be footing excavations, possibly some dewatering of the shallow groundwater table. All the material excavated, removed, will be dealt with in accordance with an excavation work plan, which I believe we provided. And then it's going to have a proper home because it is urban fill. It does contain some PAHs, cyclic hydrocarbons. I think there'll be minimal dewatering, if any. And I mean, I think that covers it. I don't know if anybody has questions related to it, but it's all, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's all going to be step by step in accordance with DEC regulations on how a site in an urban environment like this gets developed, and proper procedures will be followed as outlined on the record.
Thank you, Mr. Canavan. So Chairman Neufeld, we'll turn it back to you. We thank you again for the opportunity to be able to present to you this evening, try to address the comments and questions you do have. If there's any questions you have for us this evening, our professionals are here in order to be able to endeavor to answer your concerns.
Well, I'll certainly ask the board that in a moment. I just had one question that's come up before, and I just looking for it in my letters here. Would you let me know, with regard to Hurricane Ida, what I was curious about, and what I've asked about, I don't think we've gotten an answer. How high was the flooding at that point, and what was the nature of the damage? Because I was by the building at that time.
So I think Mr. Stein.
Yes, I had
Testify.
mentioned that earlier. In the storage building that's currently there, they had approximately 4 inches of water in the building.
Okay, and what kind of, how much, it impacted much of the interior, didn't it? I mean, I drove by there and it was difficult to drive in the area, but it was, at the time I drove, it was, I think parts of it were opened up because of the extensive flooding that the village encountered then.
All the damage was done on the other buildings. Most of the damage, it was minimum damage to this building because of the only 4 inches. And it's a concrete floor. So all the damage was done in the woodworking shop and in the front buildings in the barn.
And the woodworking shop had approximately 4 feet of water in it. And the over at the corner, there was approximately 6 feet of water in the building.
Almost 8 feet at the front of the barn, 8 feet.
Yeah.
So there were, because my recollection is that the storage facility had parts of the front were opened up.
No,
No?
we didn't open up any of the storage facility. Parts of it, you can't open it up.
Hmm.
We have doors that you open up and that's all you can open up. We didn't open up any part of the building or anything. None of the building was damaged because it's all metal frame and metal interiors.
How many feet are we away from Fenimore Road in Mamaroneck Self-Storage?
Right, Mr. Neufeld, just to clarify, the existing building is only designed with a pair of entry doors. It doesn't have the same types of roll-up doors and loading facilities that are being planned in the addition. And where the addition is planned, it's being designed at an elevation that not only accommodates floodplain conditions, but as Mr. Stein pointed out, that new facility will accommodate some of the conflicts that we have that are created by the existing buildings and hampering the ability to address water issues. I think it's important that the board listens and understands Mr. Stein's presentation because it's very complicated, very detailed, but it's important that they understand what he is describing as a stormwater system as it relates to the new facility.
Yeah, compared with the older buildings that are proposed to be demolished, which do not comply with current flood controls and requirements, the fact that the site right now is fully impervious, there are going to be pervious portions to the site, the park, and the additional flood mitigation measures that Mr. Stein walked you through earlier as it relates to the new building.
Was there damage to any of the interior stored materials or anything, or the office equipment or any equipment used for the structure of the building?
Of which building? Of the self-storage?
Yes, the self-storage.
No, but the other buildings were. The older buildings all were. 4.5 feet of water in the woodworking shop. 8 feet of water on Fenimore Road, which puts almost 8 feet of water in my front of my barn. I took the doors off and everything. That's what you saw opened because the barn doors got ripped off.
Okay, 1 second. I'm just looking back at some notes when you were here the last one earlier time. Any members have any questions?
I just want to say one thing in response to something that Mr. Murphy said at the very beginning. I'm not sure what you meant by an official visit to the site. I have been to the site because in general, the way the board members look at sites is they go on their own and look at the site. So please understand that what you said was not necessarily correct. I can speak for myself only, but I have been to the site. Since this is a question of the exterior, it did not require going into a building. It did not require anything other than looking at the site and the entire property. So I just wanted to make that clear first. But I do have a couple of questions. Was confused on the flooding drawing, which is you were explaining about the storage for the stormwater, and you said that the building itself allows, I guess it's the ground floor allows for the stormwater to run through. How does that add to the stormwater capability of the site? That was confusing to me.
It adds to the flood storage volume because whereas a typical foundation, like the foundation for the existing self-storage building, that space below the floor elevation, the first floor elevation, is filled in. That's entirely filled in with soil, material, fill. And then the first floor is actually poured on top of that fill. Whereas this building, the new addition to the building, actually before you even get there, the old building was located entirely outside of the 100-year flood zone. So it was the building itself was located outside of there. In this case, the addition is substantially or primarily located within the flood zone. So that space below the first floor is open below. It has a slight pitch from one end to another to where the floodgates are. So it eventually will all flood out or drain out. But that storage volume becomes an additional volume that doesn't currently exist.
But so, I'm sorry, I'm still confused. So it's the use of the term, the storage volume. You've essentially made a hole. I realize it was very simple, though, in my language. You've made a hole underneath the building in order to allow the stormwater to run through it. So are you, essentially, that's what you've done, if I understand correctly. Are you saying that now stormwater will collect there?
No, it's not that it'll collect there, and it's really flood water. That would be the right term. So it's really the flood water. So as the water level starts to rise in this area, it'll start to enter the floodgates on the lower level, and as it flows in, the water rises underneath, and ultimately, as it starts to recede, that water then will be removed and flow out.
So Michael, it's John Kellard. Hi. So you're not digging a hole, you're just elevating the first finished floor, the lowest finished floor above the
Correct.
existing grade.
So the existing grade at the northeastern end of the site is around elevation 22. And the first floor of the building is going to be up at elevation 28. So that's that distance between the floor up to the underside of the floor on the inside. It will be basically an open cavity. It's not going to be, the floors will be sloped, so that way it's not going to retain the water. It'll be sloped enough where it will drain out. There will be access, so if water does flood in, that they have the ability to take a squeegee or just clean any debris, that mud that may have come in there during the storm.
It's more like a crawl space, Michael. It's not
Correct.
part of the building. Nothing will be stored there. No
Correct.
equipment, no utilities.
And that
Correct.
space is above what a layperson would consider grade, or that person is below? So.
No, it's
here's
not
the
below
ground.
grade, because if it was
It's
below
but
grade, it
that's
wouldn't
what I
have
thought-
an
that's why I
ability to
was
drain out.
calling it- Okay, but you're not digging a hole per se because it's, I understand. Okay.
Well, on a portion of the site where we will be digging out, because on the southern corner of the site, that grade gets up to higher, like elevation 26, 25. So that's where the additional volume comes, is by removing that soil and having it the first floor elevated.
I think it would be helpful to have this in a diagram in the FEIS, like a cut through of the building that shows where the grade is, where your floodgates are, and where the anticipating flooded levels would be, and then where you would start having your finished floor area and your storage space, so that you can
Okay.
show that the finished floor area would be outside of the anticipated flood zone.
I have
And just to clarify, Michael, it's 47,000, is it cubic feet?
Cubic feet.
Of additional volume of storage over and above what's on site at the present time.
Correct. So it approximately, I mean, give or take, it really depends on what elevation you're looking at. I mean, if you start looking all the way up at it to elevation 27, then it becomes more, but I was looking more in the ballpark of going from elevation 21 and a half, 22 up to the 26, which is the flood
Yeah,
elevation.
which is the 100-year, the base flood elevation.
Correct.
And then
Why
can
do
you
you
just,
call it storage? I'm still confused by maybe it's the use of the term storage. Why do you say you have additional floodwater storage by making this? Because nothing's being stored on site, and so
Well,
why is,
it's being allowed to enter in. So
right,
while it's flooding, the water's being stored there, as opposed to that water going on to being pushed onto somebody else's property.
oh, I see, so, okay, now I understand.
I really
Not
think
technically
that,
storage, it's just sort of a waiting space, it's a waiting.
Robin,
got it.
I think maybe a better way to think about this is the building is not going to displace the water. The water is going to be able to come up and exist underneath the building. I don't really consider that storage. I just feel that because you have a pass-through system, it's not going to displace the water, and therefore it's not going to be pushed somewhere else. Because
Well, it
again,
actually, this is in addition to the volume we already have on site. That without using this space, we are already providing equivalent storage volume.
and that's because the foundation goes below.
Excluding anything below the basement level or the crawl space level of the proposed building, with the grading on site, and I can bring the diagram back up, you'll see that inside the building is not highlighted because the entire, that we've analyzed this. Let me just bring this back up.
It's actually replacement of floodplain volume by removing the existing buildings.
Okay. That
So
makes,
this is
It's
entire
a
footprint
simple way to look at it.
okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. That I understand, better than the word storage.
Right,
I
right.
kept looking for, actually storing it on site, and that's not what you're doing. So,
So you'll see that none of the area within that footprint of the building is colored in. So, and up here in this end, you have elevation 26, elevation 24 in the parking lot. So whereas that you really have very little storage there now, this provides much more.
Oh, well, I think Ashley's suggestion of including a diagram of inside the building that can visually explain that would be very beneficial.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
I have another question, which is for the architect or planner. I'm not sure what is. So, and it's just a sort of trying to understand. You have a list of buildings, right? And they're right of other buildings in the village and their sort of square footage within. Is that just supposed to show that there are other large buildings in the village? Because it doesn't really relate to anything. Different zoning districts allow for different sizes of buildings, different lot areas can allow bigger buildings. So is the point just to say we're not the biggest building in the village, there's lots of other big buildings, or is there some other point that you've been trying to make with that? I in the FEIS, for the first time I saw that, I was confused as to what it was showing.
Mrs. Kramer, this was a comment that has come up for a number of years that we have addressed. As I mentioned, this document was prepared actually in 2018 at the comments from the board regarding the excessive scale and volume of the building. And I think that document is very effective in showing that the proposed volume and scale of the building is not disproportionate within the village. We did receive multiple comments that it was excessive. As a reminder to the other members of the zoning board, this building is not intending to violate any zoning regulations for height. It does seek the variance of a floor within the total permitted height. It is seeking variances for FAR. Again, the conditions of this type of building and its function are not impacted in the same way as some other buildings like multifamily residences may affect the utilities and the infrastructure within the village, which is why the professional team has come together to clarify the limitations on the impacts of this type of building program. So Mrs. Kramer, is that clear? This is why we've addressed that comment over the last 4 years.
I remember, I have made the comment and I remember other people making the comment, but you list, unless I missed this when I was looking at your updated FEIS, your draft of the updated version, I may have missed it. You list those buildings, which I understand. So this building is X thousand square feet and this building is Y thousand square feet. But do you have drawings? Do you have drawings in there that shows, since you use the term scale and merely telling me the size doesn't show me scale? Do you have visuals of those buildings in their streetscape to see?
Sure, yes. I can scroll through them again, but we did submit a package which included both aerial documentation and photo documentation of those structures. And I think that we've also illustrated that the concern is not one about the proportion of our building within our neighborhood, because both through model and 2D illustration, we have shown that this building scale is not disproportionate within its community.
Okay. Thank you for answering my question.
Anyone else have any questions or anything covered besides the floor?
Yeah, I just want to say that I have visited the unit, the site also. I have not officially met with the Murphy brothers or employees for a tour, but I'm certainly happy to go and to go and see it more officially, as you'd say, and to walk closer in and share what you want to share with us that we can't see from a more informal site visit. And
Who should we contact? We can't have more than 2 members. Is that right, Charlie? Just 2 members at a time, right? You can't have more, right?
Yes, that's correct, unless you would like to notice it as a meeting, but.
Right. So assuming we just do it with 2, who do we contact from the applicant to make that appointment?
You can either contact me and I can coordinate the meeting, or you can reach out to the Murphys directly, whatever. We'd be happy to have you to the site, walk you through.
Right. Mr. Jeffrey, we'll have someone will contact you within the next week, any of the board members that'll want to go. We just can't do more than 2 at a time.
Totally understand.
And I guess I have a question. In your comments to our questions, you said that precedent is not an environmental factor when making a determination of significance. So I guess my question is, in your presentation today and in other presentations, you do cite precedent as a reason why this is something that we should consider as we're looking at significance. But you're saying we can't use precedent going forward as a environmental factor. I mean, at what point is it your position that we can look at precedents and consider that as environmental factor? Because it's kind of a catch-22. You're saying
I think what Ms. Martelli was saying as it relates to other buildings was answering another question. So when the board had on a number of occasions indicated that this is going to be the largest building in the village of Mamaroneck, or there's nothing in Mamaroneck like this, providing of the other buildings and the sizes of those buildings in relation to those lot sizes and the other zoning information is being responsive to address that question. So it's not being necessarily utilized for precedent. We're not saying, well, there's precedent, you built something, you allowed something here. It's being responsive to the question and comment that there are other buildings that have been built in Mamaroneck that are significantly larger.
So what is your view? When or if is it appropriate to look at precedent as a factor? Is your position that it's just not ever?
Yeah, Mr. Jeffrey, I think you need to make that statement one more time, and we need to make sure that the board members understand what you just said. And I want to be clear, we're not pointing it out for precedence.
Correct.
We're pointing it out to dispute the board's comment that this is the largest building in the village. We're stating very clearly that in no such way is it, nor is it close to, the largest building in the village of Mamaroneck, both by volume, by square footage, and by height.
So that's your sole point. Okay.
Very important that comments that are made to both the architectural and engineering team are rebutted so that the board understands we are listening, but we also are aware of the actual proposal that's before you. We do want to make sure the board understands the comparison, what we're presenting versus what other structures are within the village.
So that was the reason for your addressing that. I understand.
Yes, addressing the inaccuracy of that statement.
So your point is that this is not the largest project in the largest construction by square footage or size. Understood.
And your position, and I understand what you're saying. You didn't use those examples for precedent. You use that to answer questions that were asked in the past. So my question is your position that precedent is just not ever a factor that's properly used in making a determination of significance.
Our comment, and I think it was response A12 in the FEIS indicated that precedent is not an environmental factor for consideration in an environmental impact statement review.
Okay, ever.
All of them.
Mhm.
Maybe you could help me understand that. I'm just not following it either. I mean, precedent is not. If there's been precedent on certain matters that the village has taken, the boards have taken, and I don't see that here necessarily, but I'm not following what do you mean,
So under the secret regulations,
right?
precedent is not an environmental factor for the board to consider to determine whether or not there is an impact and whether or not that impact can be mitigated, as opposed to traffic or something else.
Right. But if there's if there's an impact, then subjectively, the precedential aspect of that impact is obviously weighs, right?
That's pure speculation, which again is not a factor to be considered.
Speculation is not, so noted. Okay, I'm with it. Okay. Okay. Anyone else have any,
Yeah,
Ashley, or I'm sorry, Brian?
I do, yeah. Question for Bill Canavan. Bill, who at AKRF have you been going back and forth with? You said that you've been working with them on a lot of the environmental issues. I know we heard from Brian Ziroff. Have you been speaking with him or Ashley, or who's your contact over there?
I just reviewed whatever those guys sent me. I reviewed their comments and their reports. And I commented back. I've not specifically spoken to anybody at
Okay,
AKRF. And then
All right.
that would kind of be atypical. Usually it's just like, here's our data, here's our report. This is what we did. What do you guys think? They get back to me, and then, I respond back to them.
okay.
I
You
think I
mentioned- Yeah.
probably responded 3 times on the record to AKRF's comments and a review of the work we've done.
You mentioned that you might have to do some dewatering as part of this project. Is that correct?
I mean, the water table is pretty shallow there. I think it's 6 to 8 feet. So anything that's below the water table might have localized dewatering, which would involve, pumps some groundwater, treating it, and then discharging it under permit, which is pretty common.
Right, okay. All right, and is that, haven't been on all 30 meetings. I only joined the board about 6 months ago. So is all of that in the original environmental impact statement, or is that just something that, should you encounter it, you'll be doing it, so it's duly noted that you're going to be doing it in accordance with DEC regulation or standards?
It would be duly noted, and all material removed during the excavation and or dewatering would have to comply with all local and state regulations related to it.
And the EIS does include an overview of the construction management plan and how that would work generally. The specific plan would be revised or refined when Bill works with the DEC.
Right, okay, yeah, no, my main focus and my questions, besides visual and flooding and that really were environmentally based. And the last presentation that we had included, as I said, Brian Ziroff from AKRF, who gave me the level of detail that I would really like to see as part of the FEIS. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. Ashley, if we could get a transcript of that, perhaps written and just inserted into the FEIS, his presentation was really what I was looking for, really good. This site has some unique features, given the fact that it's in the floodplain, it's an old industrial area, that there's old, I believe contamination sites, and there's a lot of interesting and unique features of this property, which dictate, going to that level of detail. And like I said, I believe that Brian did already present that. So, I don't have a lot of questions for the crew. I do think that Michael Stein's presentation has been quite helpful. I do want to see those layers, for the building, but now I understand it, and in terms of visiting the site, I've been going past that site for 30 years. I know what you've got there, and anything will be an improvement. That's certainly not an issue. You've got old structures there. I know about the flooding. I've seen the flooding, and what is currently there is certainly not good for the environment. There's no control over anything in those buildings. They're not flood rated. We have no control over what can be stored in there. And everybody ought to keep an eye to the fact that if they've got construction vehicles or oil storage or gas storage for their construction business, that what's currently there is not good. Not good at all. So I do appreciate the efforts you guys have been putting into this plan. And I do think that the process has genuinely improved everything across the board. There's more impervious surface. There's more thoughtfulness about the look. This building is going to be there long after I leave town. It's a legacy, and it should be something which the village can look to with pride. We want it to be something which is good for the economy, good for the owners, but also good for everybody else. We don't want this village to just turn into, monoliths. The work that's been done to this building is greatly appreciated, is what I'm trying to say. So no, I don't have any questions for anybody else.
Mr. Gladstein, I'd like to thank you for your comments, and if I could just respond to two things real quickly. I agree with you. Unfortunately, the process has taken a lot longer than the applicant would have liked, but I do think that the process has yielded a much better project. You've heard Mr. Cleary and Ms. Martelli before talk about what the new structure looks like. Many months ago, we walked you through what that vision was. And instead of one monolithic looking structure, it does have the step down architecture, the breakup. So it looks like several buildings. I think that's a real plus. I'd just like to correct one thing you said. I think you meant to say less impervious surface as opposed to.
No, you have more impervious surface now.
Yeah, so it's gonna be more pervious,
I misspoke.
impervious. And we can certainly update the FEIS. If you look at the FEIS that was originally submitted in September, the appendices did have transcripts of prior meetings. And I do think that the April meeting and Brian's comments, Brian from AKRF's comments to the board on that issue are extremely probative and extremely relevant. And we'd be happy to get that transcript and include it in a future version of the FEIS. I think that'll be helpful.
Mr. Cleary, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
This is a little unusual in the sense that in these matters I've been involved with, you have a lot of things here that if things arise, they get evaluated and then they get dealt with. But generally speaking, there's a level of independence. In this case, we have a well-known and highly reputable, and by history, the Murphy brothers, who are contractors, and I understand they'll be doing their own construction work. Do you have, in cases where you're having the applicant also being the contractor, what kind of a methodology is there to have an independent person with oversight to report and then to address the issues?
So I guess, Mr. Chairman, the question is, who's overseeing the construction of the plan that the Murphys are getting approved?
Correct.
While it's the Murphys building the project at the same time?
Well, it's overseeing, and it's also evaluating subjective issues that have to be reviewed and then maybe taking a different course. So it would be that, correct?
So I think what would typically occur is during the course of the submission of, so number one, you will leave a very detailed set of findings when you get to that point, which will document very clearly the limitations that will follow through the building permit process as the building moves forward. Typically, there would be a construction management plan, a building demolition plan. All of that would be part and parcel of the record that will follow from your decision here. So I don't think this is the case of the chickens watching the hen house here. I think there will be numerous levels of overview and oversight. And frankly, Mr. Chairman, you will ensure that that's the case. So I'm not
So in
concerned.
other words, by having an independent, there would be an independent person involved in that somehow.
So
We do hire an engineering company to oversee and put together a whole book of the concrete, the footings, the compression, all of that gets documented and submitted to you as part of the building process.
We're not involved in the building process itself.
But that's what you're asking for. Yes, there's somebody that's going to be overseeing it, other than
Your building department, your building department will do that.
But Mr. Chairman, again, I don't know how many times you've been involved as a lead agency with an environmental impact statement. The finding statement that you leave behind is an incredibly important document, and it will govern every other permit and approval process that follows along. So I think to the extent you have issues and concerns, you will embed them in your findings and say basically to the building department, make sure these things are addressed, make sure these concerns are addressed. So you're going to control all of this, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I have a question. Ashley, did you have any information that you're waiting for?
So-
You take that up with them at some point, separate from this, or if you want to in front of them, I don't care.
Yes, so I have two draft memos that were provided to the board. One was going through all of our previous comments and saying whether or not they've been addressed. And the other one was looking back at the comments from the board from the November 16th meeting. Following this meeting, I will finalize those memos and provide them to the board and the applicant. But just to give you an overview of what the topics are, I would say that broadly, the majority of our comments have been addressed. There are some clerical items that we've noticed, some consistency items that still need to be cleaned up. One of the big comments that I've had and that the board has had has been about the flooding. I think there was a lot more information presented tonight than what we've seen in the FEIS and in prior presentations. I think all of that needs to be in the document. And then one overarching formatting comment that I have is, instead of having the comments from the ZBA members at the November 16th meeting as response to comments in the FEIS, my preference would be to take that technical information and embed it into chapter 2, and then have your cover letter say how you address the comments at the meeting on the 16th, as well as the meeting tonight. So instead of adding additional response to comments within the FEIS, still in the record, but I think it would be more appropriate to keep the FEIS as being responding to comments that actually occurred during the public comment period.
Okay. All right, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
I just wanted to make one comment. I appreciate the hard work that the applicant has done, and I recognize that it has been a long, over months and months and I guess years to come to this place. But, their initial position was that they were not subject to any kind of secret review. And that was a pretty aggressive, position, which ultimately this board didn't agree with. But if the applicant didn't have that, aggressive position, this application would be further along than it is today. So, it's a long process. It's a much better, I agree with what Brian has to say. It's a much better proposal than what was initially presented to us. And it's been a long time. And it's just been a process. You wanted your process to argue your case, that you didn't need to go through this. And that's fair, but it did add some time to the timeline. But I think this is without question an improvement from where you started.
Okay, if there's nothing further, the applicant has nothing further, the board has nothing further. Is there a motion to adjourn then?
Mr. Neufeld, I just want to reiterate the items that are being requested by the board members. A photo document, which is a semi-aerial at the corner of Waverly Avenue and Fenimore Road. A resubmission of any 3D models illustrating more accurately buildings in the foreground of
Together
those
with,
renderings.
and together with photographs as well as the computer generated ones.
Photographs of those vantage points.
Yes.
And I'm going to clarify what was asked for of Mr. Stein regarding illustration of the flood collection areas. To me, that would be appropriately a schematic building section that illustrates to the board the elevations of the floors, the elevations of the existing site grading, proposed site grading, and a highlighted area to understand that space that's utilized for water volume.
And on that diagram, I would put what the 100-year floodplain elevation is, as well as where Ida hit.
Michael, agreed? Shake your head.
No problem.
And the transcript from the April meeting.
Right, as well as other items. I don't know. I mean, I've been making notes here, but as you've been going through this, but you could be.
No, I want to be clear because actually I think I listed all the items.
I can't answer that because I don't have a photographic memory of this past hour.
Right, no, and as Tony said, I do want the transcript from the April meeting.
Okay.
That's,
So I think we have the major items, and we'll certainly circle back with Ms. Lai offline.
And we'll also be in contact with you about the site visit. Super. Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Is there a formal motion? If nobody wants to move, just
well, I
we can just.
think Robin moved.
Oh, I didn't hear. I'm sorry. Robin moved to adjourn. Okay.
I did.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay, that's fine. We really don't usually do, but all right, fine. Greta?
Yeah, that's fine. I was thinking maybe we could talk about, that litigation, but that's okay. We don't have to. We can do it.
No, we do that the next time. Yeah.
I'm not going to be here on Thursday, but I'll just catch up with you later then.
And we should, we can do that in executive session too. So we'll have a separate link available.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Greta, you good for adjourn?
Yep.
Okay, Robin is good. Brian?
Yes.
Robin, you said yes, right? I think.
Yes, yes.
Okay, yes. All right. That does it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Good luck, everyone.